Adonis.js is a model view controller framework, and that is exactly the pattern we are going to use to learn it. When we served the application in the last video, we ended up with this. So let's go ahead and understand in this video how this comes to pass. I'll head over to my start directory immediately, and then I'll open the routes.js file, and this is where all the routes for application are registered. A route listens to an endpoint and then decides how that endpoint is going to be handled by the application. So I'm going to remove what we have here right now, and then we're going to implement it together from scratch. So first of all, how do I get the router? Constant route, I create a new constant, and then I'm going to use route. Now in Adonis.js, think of the use function as an enhanced require function. So for example, if Adonis has a package in its core, rather than using require and specifying the full path, Adonis provides us with a use function where we specify, for example, an alias, and Adonis is going to fetch that for us. Okay, so when we use, just know that it's kind of a require, and if you're wondering where this is coming from, don't worry, we're going to go deep into aliases, but basically this is an alias for where the router is located, and using this use function, Adonis is able to get the router itself and provide it to us in this variable. Okay, so once we get the router, let's define a get route. So route.get, and would say when the user visits this home page, we're going to execute a function. Now, the second parameter passed into this get is a function, right? So if you've used express routes before, you know that this is almost exactly the same. So this function takes in a context where we have the request and the response. So the context is basically a large object that contains details about the request, details about the response, and many other stuff that we can actually use to handle the request for the user. Okay, so when we receive the request and the response right here, let's just return a response.json, which means this is how we can return a JSON response to our user, and we're gonna say message response handled successfully. Okay, so if you go to our browser right now and everything works correctly, we should actually see a JSON response, right? So let's go ahead and refresh this page, and now we have this message JSON that is returned to us. So this is how we can respond with JSON responses, right? But what we want to do in this case is render a view. So like we said, everything that we need to actually handle our request is given to us in this object right here. So among that, we have a view object that we can use. So rather than returning this, we're going to use our view object, and we have the render function there that helps us render a particular view. Now, if you go to your resources directory, you have a views directory where all of your views are registered. So if we want to render the welcome view, then we're just going to put welcome right here. And this is automatically going to know that it's supposed to fetch the welcome.h view from the views directory. Okay, so quick refresh, and we are back to that beautiful view. So if you go to that view, just to make sure that we're actually getting it from there, and delete this text right here, save that, refresh, we can see that the text is gone, right? So to render a view in Adonis, we just get the view object from the context. So if you're in a controller, you also have to get the context from the function, and if you're just passing closures right here, the context is also going to come in to this function as a parameter. Okay, so we can get the view from the context and then return view.render that specific view. Now I'm going to show you a shorthand for this. Adonis provides us with a very short way of doing this. So if you have an endpoint that simply renders a view like this one, there's no need for you to have all of this logic, right? So Adonis provides us with an on function where we specify the route, and then we specify the render or the view that is supposed to be rendered. So in this case, the welcome view. So when the user visits this route, render welcome. If we refresh, yeah, we have exactly the same thing. Okay, so thank you so much for watching, and we're going to continue talking about this in the very next lesson.